Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Core Vision Financial Group's videos on financial topics. Thank you for joining us today and we appreciate you taking the time to watch our videos. Please go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our videos so you're notified when we post a new one. Again, thank you for taking the time and I hope you enjoy this topic. Today we're joined by Andrea Lee of Core Vision Financial Group and we're going to talk about the gender gap in investing. We hear about a gender gap in pay a lot of times. So in our industry, what we're starting to hear about and see a lot of is a gender gap in investing between men and women. So thanks for joining us today, Andrea.
Thanks for having me. I am going to pick on you a little bit.
Why is that?
Well, because yesterday when we were talking about this topic and you were like, women and an investing gender gap, why would I care about that? Yes, I know you were joking, but I will say, even if you are male, this is gonna or could potentially affect you because currently, because of this gap, there is a $3.2 trillion amount of money that would be added to the market if women weren't behind in their retirement savings, which would benefit both of us.
I agree with that.
Okay.
So Andrea, go ahead and give a brief introduction of yourself.
All right. I'm Andrea Lee. I am an advisor with Core Vision Financial Group. I've been here since 2017. I'm a CFP, a certified financial planner. My hobbies include working out and running my kids to and fro.
All right, so when we talk about the gender gap in investing, what does that mean?
First, I want to talk about just the wage gap because that is one of the things that affects the investment gap as well. So in 2022, women made 82 cents for every dollar that their male coworkers made. And that was across the whole board. That was full-time, part-time, just kind of everything thrown into one. So on average, 82 cents in comparison to the dollar for a male. I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to get into the right and wrong. Like, that is not what this topic is about. It's more about educating what the current situation is and then finding ways to fix it. Okay? The other issue that kind of contributes to this that people have also probably heard of is the pink tax, and that's just historically products that have been designed solely for women tend to be higher in price than they are than products that are solely for men. So feminine hygiene products, for example. Again, in 2022, CVS dropped all of their tax on feminine hygiene products, and they're not alone. It's making that move. So it's getting better. It's absolutely getting better. I believe this was big in the 90s, but still exists, but it has contributed to this deficit, if you will, in female retirement funding.
I had never heard of that until you wrote the blog. And when I was reading the blog post, I was like, I didn't even know what it meant, and then when I read through and it described it, I was like, got it.
Yeah, education. So, yeah. I mean, that's it. I think a lot of, let's face it, most topics, just understanding and knowing what exists, that's the majority of the issue or the problem and the way to solve it. So those two things are a little more, I think as a society, we're a little more familiar with. But what I want to focus on is the investing gap. So that being said, like I mentioned, the 3.2 trillion assets under management would be 3.2 trillion added into assets under management if we were the equivalent of the male.
Does that 3.2 trillion exist somewhere?
No, the way I understand it is it's because of that wage gap. One, right? So as women don't make as much, they're not able to save as much. We're also going to talk about other factors as well. That's just one that people I think are most familiar with. So another one is women tend to be a little more risk averse. So they keep more money in cash, and by not investing, I just did a talk a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the market, and it was specifically for women and that risk averse topic. And from the last 100 years in the stock market, 70% of the time the market is up. And I forget all the rest of the statistics, but it was significant. It was significant in favor of being in the market. Now, granted, right now, everybody's a little more scared because things have been a little more volatile, but that's normal. When you look at historically over time what the market has done, yes, each one of these feels like it's the first time, and it's it hasn't looked exactly like this.
It's different this time.
Right.
Is the quote
right.
you hear all the
Absolutely. And yes, that is true. Each one of these is different. But over the last 100 years, there have been a lot of things that have been thrown at that market, and it still comes out ahead. And so, obviously, none of us know what the future holds. But if we're going based on 100-year historical, occurrences, then it's the best place to be.
Right, and that's the only data we have, is what's
right.
happened in the last 100 years, and it says the market always comes back from that.
Right.
So.
Right, and yes, we all would love to know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, but if we knew that, we would not be sitting here. We would be on a beach and having a much better time enjoying our better weather.
Better weather. Yeah.
But so keeping that money in cash also contributes, right? Because it's not going to have the same growth rate.
So, not to jump ahead, but the risk aversion, right? A lot of times when you talk to people who've never invested before or aren't familiar, educated on the investments, they usually tend to think that they're risk averse, right? But through education and experience, even if you get in the market and you go conservative, over time you're going to be like, okay, this is what's happened. Now maybe I can adjust my risk tolerance, saying, hey, now I've got some market experience. I'm comfortable with these investments. What else is out there that I could invest in? Right.
Well, and something else, time horizon should have quite a bit to do with, your risk tolerance as well. The longer you have in the market, the more aggressive, more than likely you should be. Not every situation is different, and that's why we talk with clients on their individual situations. But, if you're 25 and you're not retiring until you're 65, you've got 40 years for this to continually just grow. And so that's your best place to be. But again, that comes with education, because something that I think a lot of times people also don't remember is, cash feels safe because that number doesn't ever go down. And it's going to go up and down if it's in the market. There's no denying that. But if you're only in cash, because of inflation, it is slowly going down over time. You just don't see it. But, a dollar can't buy today, or could buy today, and it won't be able to buy the same thing in 10 years. Like, that's just how that works, right?
Remember the Big Mac example
yes.
we looked at like 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think it ends up like at $20.
Yeah.
So with that, and maybe that's extreme, but point being, the only way to keep up with inflation is to have that money invested. So again, that comes with education and just knowing that and thinking about it. And I'll pick on Bo a little bit too, because a lot of times I'll hear people say the stock market is like gambling.
Like a casino.
Yes. And there are things that are that risky. There is no doubt about it. When you get into some much heavier stuff. However, the companies that we invest in have balance sheets and track records, and they're not solely by chance like it would be rolling the dice or spinning a roulette wheel, for example, which is solely just chance.
Yeah.
I would say that's not how the stock market is.
I think you're picking on Bo, but we did a podcast, it may have been 2 years ago, where we compared the stock market to gambling and the odds, those that each of those games have compared to the odds of the stock market. I mean, we did a kind of a deep dive on that stuff a long time ago, and you're correct, right? Those are games of, odds and chance and luck, whereas the market, we know historical returns.
Right.
We know all of that stuff.
Well, right, and we know what, like, the cash position of these companies, like, all these things are public knowledge, and so it's not, and I say that about Bo more cheeky than anything because he knows this too. He just, sometimes we giggle about it. So yeah, I think just kind of knowing those things, and right, wrong, or indifferent. Another reason, we kind of touched on it with a couple different topics, but women as a whole, not every single woman, but as a whole, a lot of times feel like they lack the knowledge to be in these conversations. And this is not rocket science, I promise. I would love to sit here and tell you how it's just so hard and I'm so intelligent. That's just not reality. The people that are super duper duper smart are the people that are making up these mutual funds and doing trades for these huge companies. So those people exist in this business, but it really is just looking at data and really using metrics and just kind of putting all that together, talking to clients and what works for them, what their goals are, and all of those things, and then putting that package together with recommendations. So, don't feel like this is something that you could never understand, because absolutely you could and can.
And a great resource for that education is our YouTube page.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're approaching 40 videos, I think, on that page that talks about all kinds of different investments. I mean, all kinds of information is on there to be used as an education piece.
Absolutely.
And just YouTube in general, not even our page.
Right, absolutely.
There's just a ton of information out there.
Well, and I think too, kind of going back to what adds to that or what has caused that. And again, this is not a political conversation. It's not a right or wrong. It's just reality. Adds to this point. I mean, I'm very thankful that I've grown up in the time frame or the time period that I did, because things were a lot rougher before. And I wouldn't have been able to do this for a living because I would have been expected to stay home with my children. And I love my children and I love my time with them. But I also have more that I would like to do in this place. And so I think that just the ads of mom having dinner ready when dad comes home, and how to be beautiful for him when he walks in the door, and have the house clean, and all these things, that hasn't helped us have an interest in investing. Whereas in men's magazines and things like that, they're talking about, what's your portfolio look like? What's your return been? And those conversations also tend to gravitate in male circles, whereas with females, they don't. And so adding those together has kind of maybe taught us that that's not what we're supposed to be interested in. In reality, that's just not the case.
Well, and they didn't curate, I'll say, the education pieces towards women at all, right?
Right.
Well, just like you're saying, everything was, no, this is the man's responsibility or whatever. And then, like you said, the time period we're in now, I think the technology exists, the information's out there on the internet, that anybody can educate themselves on this. I mean, it does take a little bit of time, but watching YouTube videos, short 15-minute YouTube videos, you can become pretty knowledgeable on topics.
Absolutely. And I think, too, our male counterparts, or at least the smart ones, have realized we have a lot to offer this world, and, allowing us to do more than just make dinner and have the house clean will only help our households and this world, in my opinion. And that's a whole nother soapbox topic. But it is kind of, again, going back, it's a male-dominated industry. Again, the reasonings behind it, whatever. But that probably also has caused a little bit of, because a lot of times I'll hear from women that, well, my husband handles that, or my husband enjoys that, or I'm not really comfortable talking to our advisor, so my husband, because I don't understand it, or however that looks, there aren't as many female advisors. It's a male dominated field, and so that probably has also contributed, because it sometimes, and I will say this from my own experience, it sometimes feels like a boys club. And luckily, where I am, everybody is extremely welcoming, and I don't necessarily feel that in my specific environment, but as a whole, as an industry, there just aren't as many females, and so that also probably contributes. And then the other, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's harder for women to get into this industry even today? Or do you think that just because of history, they aren't, I'll say, or they don't feel like it's open to them?
I think that exists. I also think this is a relationship building business. So if you have had, you played sports, or you've coached these kids, or whatever it may be, and you are yourself male, and so the circle that you run around in is male, then yes, that probably does feed more into that system. My particular situation is a little bit unique because my dad only had daughters, and my dad loves this, and so if he was going to teach anybody, it was going to be us.
Right.
And so I've always kind of had that in my household. And math has always been my strength. There's no denying that. But even early in my marriage, Jason and I kind of tried to fill those roles. Like, he handled the bills and I did all the household stuff. Not that he's better at being domestic, but he's definitely not better at the finances. And there's nothing wrong with that. Math is not his strength, it's mine. And so why would we force him into a role that he's not comfortable or really interested in when I am? And so just kind of tweaking those gender roles, like traditional gender roles, and trying to make things work for our household and what makes sense for us has been really helpful. And not trying to squeeze ourselves into spaces that just aren't our strengths. So yeah, I think it's getting better. But the other thing that I think contributes to women not being comfortable in the space is just lack of time. So historically, women are the ones that are giving care for their children if they have elderly parents. Women tend to be the ones that stay home to do those things. So then that also then will take away from their income, right? Because they're not working all of the same amount of years. So that would affect their retirement savings, as well as just having time in their day to watch YouTube videos to study, because they're trying to get dinner on the table and run everybody to and fro and, all of those things. So, and I stayed home. I mean, I've done that too. And I enjoy working much more, just because I feel like I have more to offer. And I don't mean that negatively at all, but my kids got into school age, and then I was kind of like, So I'm much happier in the workforce too, which is nice. I've kind of been able to do both, which is very nice. All right.
But I think I'll say that you and I've talked about this a couple of times. Right, and when we start tossing around ideas for videos for you, they generally tend to lean towards women topics, right? Which is totally fine. I mean, you have the female perspective. I think that's unique to this office because we do have a female advisor. We can get the female perspective on these videos and a lot of stuff, right? Because you watch a lot of videos on YouTube, it's all male advisors. I shouldn't say all, but it's generally dominated by male advisors.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I mean, I don't expect you to have my perspective.
Right.
Right? And so now I do expect you to listen to my perspective. But I mean, you're human, right? You're only going to see what you see. And so I think it's good that we do have these conversations, because you're going to be a better advisor too if you know these are some of the things that women worry about or struggle with or whatever. You're going to be better in that space talking, to male and female couples or individuals, that making sure that you're sensitive to some of these things.
And that's what I was getting to. I think that it makes us better as a group of advisors that we have a female perspective in here, because a lot of times, so some of my experience as an advisor with female clients are they come in and the husband has passed away or they've divorced and they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, or hey, there's this policy that I don't know anything about. Can you help me with that? And from my perspective, I'm like, oh, you have this. I feel like, oh, the previous advisor didn't do a good job educating you on it. But in hindsight, it may have been the husband just took care of it. And now that he's no longer in the picture, there was never any education for her to understand the policy.
Or be interested in it.
Or be interested.
Like it was just not ever a thing. And so I think education and bringing those topics are important. Like the things that you need, the reasons you need to be involved in these conversations with your finances aren't because it's going to be your responsibility. If you're not interested in taking it over, great. But in the event that something happens, you want to at least know what's going on, because you're going to be dealing with loss and mourning and all of those. You don't want to have to be like trying to figure all this other stuff out too. If you can do that now and at least have, a basic understanding, it's going to make that a little less awful.
Right. And the statistic in your blog that blew my mind was that only 23% of men are invested in the market and only 10% of women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought those numbers were way higher. I would thought when you take 401ks into account, that number would be way higher.
Mm-hmm.
But 10% of women, that number is not very high.
Right. Well,
I know the men is double of that, but still 23%.
It's still not much.
Still not very
right.
high.
And that brings up a whole nother topic, just being ready for retirement. And a lot of people aren't. And you're bringing light to that and why. Social Security was not designed to cover all of our expenses in retirement. And unfortunately, not everyone realizes that. And so they're not doing proper retirement savings. I think
there's got to be a percentage of the population to where it just doesn't fit into their budget.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And going back to, if you make less money in the wage gap, you then are going to be at a bigger disadvantage from that standpoint. So yes, so they're all related. So women aren't saving as much in retirement because of all of these things. That's obviously an issue. So with women having this deficit in retirement savings, it puts them 80% more likely than men to become impoverished in retirement. Not a place that any of us want to be, right? So there's that.
Yeah, when I read that stat this morning, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, 80% more likely. And women also have higher healthcare costs. Some of that could be because women tend to live longer, so that in itself. But men's healthcare costs are 91% of women. So not way off, but still less.
And that most of that is probably because they don't live as long, right?
Right.
That's probably a huge part of that. Not that they're healthier, it's just that they don't live as long.
Right. And so, you're starting to see this issue, right? So women as a whole have less in savings, but they're living longer and have more expenses.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a problem. And then we had already touched on those heavy cash positions aren't going to produce the same return. And so they won't keep up in that same manner as if it were invested. So we've kind of addressed all the issues. How do we fix it?
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to ask you. I was like, well, you've identified all the problems. Now how do we fix them? And obviously, it's taken a long time to get to this point. It's not we just turn this switch,
right,
and it all becomes better. no, it's going to take probably generations
Absolutely.
of women becoming educated on the market and investments, and then feeling more comfortable to get involved in women talking about these
Right.
topics.
Well, I mean, and we've come leaps and bounds, right? I mean, you are not probably going to see in a magazine now how to make yourself pretty for when your husband gets home from work. Like, that's just probably not going to happen. And it's not because we have brains and they function very well. So, anyway, so education, I think, it is number one, what helps this. And again, though I think there are some people that like to pretend that this is so difficult to understand, it really is not. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And that's never my goal. My goal always in a meeting is to make sure that my client or whomever I'm speaking with understands fully what's happening. This is your money, so you need to understand what's happening with it. Yes, I appreciate that you trust me to help you with those decisions, but as a good advisor, as a fiduciary, it is important to me that you understand the decisions that are being made. And I want to empower you to do that, because eventually, you're a better client of mine if you fully understand this.
100%.
So, and you make the world a better place, in my opinion, too. So there's that. But I think the industry as a whole needs to welcome women, and you may have a different perspective. And I'll be honest, I think in our office, we probably do have a different perspective than the world as a whole. But some women are going to prefer a female advisor, just like some women prefer a female doctor. That's okay. The nice thing is we have that option available. Do I think that I have a different perspective than you do? Yes. Do I think I'm any more capable? No. But that doesn't mean that comfort level isn't going to exist either way. I mean, that can go either way. I'm sure that there are some male clients that don't want to work with females. That's.
I would bet there are females, right? Like older females who are like, no, I've always been told this is.
It's a male thing.
Yeah, it's a male thing. So I want to work with a male advisor, just because in their brain that's just what they've always been told. Probably for generations. If you go back to the early 1900s, they were probably like, that's a man thing. The men take care of the money.
Right.
So, you could get that. I think that's what's so great about this industry is when you go into a client meeting, you never know when you're meeting a client for the first time, you have no idea. You've got to go in there with no preconceived notions about anything, about whether they have money or not, any of that stuff, because you just don't know. And if you go in there with some type of preconceived notion, you could be wrong 50% of the time.
Absolutely. And sell them and yourself short.
100%.
But, I always am excited when I meet with young women in particular that want to get started on savings or just understand their finances. I've had those appointments where they're just like, I just don't know where to even start. I love that. I love that they want to know, right? Like, that's the world is changing if that's happening, right? But I think too, we're always told, like, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about money, you don't talk about religion, right?
Right.
And right, wrong, or indifferent, we have been taught that that's inappropriate. There are still ways to talk about that would be inappropriate. But as a whole, and the topic and making recommendations on advisors or people that they work with or all of those things are completely acceptable. Yes, you may not want to talk about what your salary is and all of those things. I would agree that's probably not necessary. But we can establish in social circles these conversations and make that a comfort space without ever getting into those topics, those specifics, I guess. So I think it puts us at a disadvantage by not doing that. Because again, that's for the boys.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a difference between men and women. Like when I did my Europe trip and we were trying to figure out how to do our banking, I had to call each one of my friends and be like, how much money are you making here? Mm-hmm. And none of them had any issue telling me how much money they made. Mm-hmm. But I think in general, if at Thanksgiving I went to the table and said, how much money do you make a year? How much money do you make a year? How much money do you know what I mean?
Right.
People would probably lose their mind.
Right. Right.
And so you're right, there's all these taboo topics.
Right.
Right, that you're not supposed to talk about in public. And it's like, for the most part, yeah, everybody doesn't need to know your salary. But you should have a close circle of friends to where you're like, hey, what do you do for this?
Right.
Or are you guys using somebody? How do you know how much money to have saved for retirement? That type of stuff. Because if you don't talk about it, then nobody gets educated on it.
Then only 23% of men.
Right, you're right.
So yeah, and that's a problem in itself. I think obviously 10% is a much bigger problem with females, but in general, I think retirement savings is lower than it should be.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that also goes back to education. If you've never been told the stock market or investing, however you want to do that, there's real estate, there's all kinds of ways. But if you've never been told the importance or been educated on why that works or why that should work, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, you're not going to have any you're not going to put any effort or energy into that.
You don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a saying I like to say sometimes when people are like, oh, I didn't know that. It's not been something you focused on. It's just nobody can expect you to know the things you don't know.
Which is an excellent point. Going back to if you are a person that feels uncomfortable or just less knowledgeable about this topic, when you're in a client meeting, we don't expect that from you. Like, at least I look at myself as an educator. So I don't ever want anybody to feel like they shouldn't ask a question because they should automatically know it. Absolutely not. Yep. You ask that question because you'll then know it next time. And there are no bad questions in that space because, again, we go back to it is your money. You need to be the one that's empowered and making those decisions. And absolutely, advice is helpful, and I get that. But you need to fully understand what choices you're making.
Yeah, and I think of it the same way as you do. When we're sitting in that meeting, I'm there as a resource, and you say, hey, I want to know about something. Okay, let's write it down. Let's pull it up on the screen.
Right.
Let's walk through it. What do you want to know about this? What can I help you understand? What can I find out for you? What can I...
Right, absolutely. I consider myself like the person that does the research and finds all the information, and then we talk about it so that, and again, I'm happy to kind of tell you what I would do or in that situation, but ultimately, absolutely, it needs to be the client that is making those decisions. Yeah. But it's our job to make sure they understand them.
Somebody one time said, you think of this as they're the owner of the baseball team, right? The client is the owner of the baseball team. I am the general manager, and all the position players are the investments. Mm-hmm. We can change those, we can sell them, we can buy new ones, we can do whatever we want in there. But ultimately, they own it. I'm helping them make those decisions. But ultimately, like you said, it's their money, it's their decision. Give them 2 or 3 options. Hey, look, these are options. These are things you could do. These are investments you could get into. But it's ultimately your decision. And a lot of times the client says, well, look, I don't feel like I know enough about it. What is your recommendation? And then, you would walk through that. Right.
And I think, too, at least in our firm, we're not going, if we have somebody who's just getting started, we're not going to throw the whole gamut of things out at them and be like, okay, these are all the things that you have to choose them. We're going to start simple, right? Get your feet wet, get you comfortable. Then, as that grows, and maybe we have a little more that, we want to put in a different bucket. Well, let's look at it, diversifying over into this space. And so as time goes, like this relationship with our clients is ongoing. It's ideally it's their lifetime. And so, like one client meeting, it's not like we're going to be like, okay, you're doing options, we're going to do some straddles, like all these things, and then break. Like that's not how it's going to be. We're going to keep it simple, make sure that we just do baby steps along the way, and then eventually, you're comfortable.
As that education builds, right, and your risk tolerance grows, then it's a shift, right? It's okay, look, hey, we've crossed this threshold, now you feel more comfortable. What if we added, this asset class or, that?
Right. Well, and it's always kind of going back to how the market is now. It's always more comfortable in meetings with clients that have been through this a couple times, right? Because they're like, we've been through it, we know what to expect. This is a part of it. And then they move on. Whereas if this is the first time, they're a little more apprehensive, which is fine. It's understandable. It's absolutely understandable. But again, it goes back to that education and experience of just being through it. And, it makes a difference.
Yeah, big difference. So what else about the gender investment gap do you want to touch on?
I do want to touch on a resource that we have that we offer for free through our website. Let's say that you want to get started, you don't know where to start, you're kind of scared to even meet with somebody yet. Fine. Totally fine. Go to our website, go to the services page.
What is our website?
www.corevisionfg.com. So corevisionfg.com. Anyway, go to the services tab, go to the My Blocks drop down. That is a whole library of different financial blocks, and they're like 5 minutes a piece. So it's not something that's going to take all evening. And they're all different topics. It could be fun little things like, what does a Big Mac cost today and what will it cost in the future? It could be that simple. It could be, what do I want my retirement look like? Like there's all kinds of things. And they ask you a few simple questions, you put in your answers, and then it spits out whatever information you're looking for. You do have to create an account with an email address. But other than that, that's it. That's all it takes. They do send us your email address, but I promise we won't spam you.
Nor will we sell your data.
But anyway, it's just an easy way to kind of get started that's non-invasive and maybe not so scary. And so I absolutely recommend starting there if that's kind of the space that you feel like you're in. So great resource.
Idea. Great idea. I hadn't even thought about bringing up the My Blocks, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think it's great for all ages. Like there's even like college loan. I mean, there's all kinds of topics in there. So I think it's great no matter the age or the experience level. I think too, maybe you've been saving in your 401k and you're 55 and you're thinking about retirement. That's also a great place to go and just kind of get some ideas and get your feet wet, and just maybe start thinking about some things.
And also feel free to reach out to us.
100%.
Call us, email us, go to the website, watch our YouTube videos. All of those things are great resources, and we're very willing to help out with any of that stuff.
And if you're female, I'm super excited.
And also something else, using the My Blocks into, the Money Guide Pro and building a financial plan and talking about what does this look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 15 years? The more information you have, the more power you have, right? So.
Well, and again, it goes back. We start baby steps, right? And then we just build on that. So yeah, it's not a scary place, I promise. And my goal, this is one thing that I think too, my goal is never to, and not yours isn't either, is never to make it so that you save every single dime and you can't enjoy life. That's not it at all. Right, we're talking about your goals and where you want to be, which goes back to why both people in a relationship need to be involved, because you empower them, right? Because here's the goal that they've come up with, or goals, whatever that may be. And then here's where we're starting from. Well, if that's their goal, all we're doing is giving them proper steps to get there.
Yep.
right? Like, we're on the same team. We aren't the bad guys trying to be like, no, don't spend your money. We're saying, this is what this looks like. This is how to accomplish this goal. It's your choice, kind of those steps and how they look, but we give them kind of the
roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, instead of it being like a opposite side of the table feeling, we're on your team.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
Great, what a great conversation.
thanks for letting me talk about girl stuff.
Well, again, everybody, thank you for watching our video today. Please go to our YouTube page, subscribe to our videos, get notified every time we post one. And again, thank you for your time. We appreciate you watching our video. Thank you.